She couldn't smile anymore. Not from sadness, but because her skin literally wouldn't let her. The surgery was meant to save her career. Instead, it destroyed the very thing that made her a star. And she wasn't the only one. How far did Hollywood's beauty obsession really go? Mary Pickford couldn't cry on screen because her face no longer knew how. She was America's sweetheart, a silent film legend whose expressions could melt hearts without a single word. But in the early 1930s, terrified of losing her youthful image, Mary underwent one of the first facelifts in Hollywood history. The procedure was crude and experimental and irreversible. Her once expressive features became stiff, her smile frozen, her brows immobile. What was meant to preserve her stardom instead silenced the very tool that made her iconic. As talkies took over and roles dried up, Mary withdrew. The studios stopped calling. Audiences stopped watching. She spent her final decades secluded in her mansion, surrounded by portraits of a face she no longer recognized in the mirror. She thought beauty would buy her time. It stole her instead, and yet another starlet went under the knife. But not for fame. She was already famous. Carmen Miranda's face was her brand, until surgery gave her one she couldn't control. She was already a global sensation, known for her vibrant costumes and electric stage presence. But offstage, Carmen battled insecurities about her wide nose and aging skin. Despite her success, she underwent rhinoplasty, and later, a facelift. The nose job was subtle. The facelift wasn't. It left her with a stretched, wide-eyed look she couldn't escape. Directors noticed. So did fans. Her performances were still energetic, but her expressions, once warm and magnetic, now looked strained, almost artificial. The woman who brought joy to millions began fading from the spotlight. Privately, Carmen confessed to friends that she didn't recognize herself anymore, that chasing perfection had erased something real. She thought the camera wanted youth, but what it missed was her soul. And the next actress? She didn't choose surgery out of vanity. She was pressured into it, before she even became a star. Judy Garland was told she wasn't pretty enough, so they carved her into someone who was. Before she ever clicked her ruby slippers, MGM executives had already decided Judy needed fixing. A nose job, jaw reshaping, harsh diets, even pills to control her weight. She was just a teenager, reshaped by studio orders before she fully became herself. The nose job, done with inserted discs to tilt the tip, gave her that signature upturned look. But behind the smile was a girl spiraling. Judy would joke about her minor repairs, but the damage ran deep. Years later, she underwent jaw surgery to sharpen her profile. But it wasn't about vanity. It was about survival in a town that saw her face as a flaw. Her talent was unmatched, but her body was treated like a project. They told her it was the price of stardom. But for Judy, that price never stopped rising. The next actress, however, made the choice herself and wore it like armor. Joan Crawford didn't hide her surgery. She weaponized it. In 1953, as whispers swirled that her career was over, Joan made a stunning comeback with a brand new face, a facelift, breast enhancement, everything but the attitude. When asked about the transformation, she quipped, "The face and boobs are new, only the ass is original." But beneath the bravado was a woman clawing for relevance in an industry that punishes aging. The procedures worked. Briefly. Johnny Guitar, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, was powerful, but short. Hollywood still wanted her younger, softer, and silent. Joan leaned into the image, sharp, cold, unbending. The surgeries made her a topic in tabloids, not just scripts. And though she embraced the knife, it couldn't cut through the loneliness that followed. She rebuilt her face to stay in the spotlight. But the brighter the light, the longer the shadows. The next transformation? Far more dangerous and far more permanent. Marina Dietrich didn't age. She engineered herself not to. She didn't rely on makeup. She removed molars to hollow her cheeks. She taped her face tight before every appearance. She even used electrolysis to erase her widow's peak, sculpting a forehead the studios deemed perfect. Behind the velvet gowns and candlelit glamour was a woman micromanaging every strand of her existence. Dietrich's look wasn't just beauty. It was architecture, but this obsession had a price. Friends said she spent hours lighting her own scenes, hiding any sign of age with shadows and symmetry. Romance faded. Friendships grew strained. Her daughter once described her as a prisoner to mirrors. Dietrich's control was legendary. But control, when stretched too tight, snaps. She became the illusion, so flawlessly that even she couldn't see the woman underneath. And yet, for the next star, it wasn't heritage she erased. It was her entire identity. Rita Hworth was born Margarita Cancino. Hollywood erased everything but her smile. Before she became the flame-haired bombshell, studios demanded she shed her Spanish roots. First came electrolysis to painfully raise her hairline, reshaping her face into something more American. Then came skin-lightening treatments, brutal hair dye routines, and strict image coaching. By the time she hit stardom, Rita Hworth no longer resembled the woman she once was. The transformation made her famous, but fractured her. Off camera, she spoke often of feeling like a stranger to herself. In private moments, she used her birth name, clinging to whatever pieces the industry hadn't stolen. Her success was dazzling, but her selfhood was diluted in the process. She didn't just change her look, she had to vanish, piece by piece, to be seen. The next legend? Her transformation was subtle, but it came with quiet demands from some very powerful voices. Elizabeth Taylor didn't just reshape her face, she reshaped Hollywood's idea of beauty. Early in her career, MGM executives whispered that her nose was too thick at the base. Subtle changes were made, likely a rhinoplasty in her 20s, though Elizabeth never confirmed it outright. What she did admit was telling. It wasn't like it is today, but it did change my looks. The transformation was delicate, but deliberate. A new profile, a sharper jawline, a face ready for the close-ups that would define a generation. But it didn't stop there. She famously shaved her face to smooth her skin, what we now call dermaplaning. Years before the practice became mainstream, even her pores were edited in real life. Her beauty became so iconic, it overshadowed the small scars and choices that built it. They called her perfect, but perfection, in her case, was carefully stitched together. The next star didn't chase youth. She fought to keep her talent from being buried under it. Bette Davis didn't fear aging. She feared being forgotten. By the 1950s, the roles stopped coming, not because her talent had faded, but because her face had changed. Hollywood didn't care that she had 2 Oscars. It cared about crow's feet. So Bette chose a facelift, not out of vanity, but out of fury. She called it a tactical decision, a way to extend her career after being dropped by Warner Brothers. The results were modest, but effective. She landed All About Eve and proved she wasn't going quietly. But Bette never pretended to love the game. She hated the double standard. Men were allowed to gray, wrinkle, sag. Women had to fight gravity or disappear. She once said, "Getting old is not for sissies." And for her, neither was surgery. She didn't chase youth. She used it as a weapon. The next story? The knife didn't just alter a face, it altered a destiny. Rudolph Valentino went under the knife for his ears. He was the original Hollywood heartthrob, the silent screen's smoldering icon. But early in his career, casting agents kept fixating on one thing: his ears. They stuck out too far, they said. Distracting. So Valentino had them surgically pinned back, a procedure considered bizarre, even risky. In the 1920s, the change was subtle, but the effect was seismic. Almost overnight, he went from background player to box office sensation. The ears were no longer a topic. His jawline, his stare, his presence took center stage. Fans swooned, studios lined up. The surgery paid off, professionally, but the symbolism was harder to ignore. Even he, with all that magnetism, had to conform. They say the camera doesn't lie, but in Valentino's case, it never told the full truth. And then came the actress, who chased not just her former beauty, but her former self. Lana Turner didn't want to look young. She wanted to look 27. In her 60s, Lana walked into a plastic surgeon's office clutching an old photo. It was a studio headshot from her glory days, the height of her fame, the prime of her face. "This," she said, "is what I want to look like." And she meant it. The facelift that followed tightened her skin, lifted her cheeks, and tried to erase 4 decades of wear. But something deeper stirred beneath the stitches. Turner wasn't just chasing youth, she was chasing a memory. A time when she ruled the screen, when every flashbulb adored her. The surgery sharpened her features, but not her legacy. Critics noticed, so did the press. Some called her brave. Others said she looked like a wax figure of her former self. She wasn't afraid of aging. She was afraid of being forgotten. They sculpted their faces to survive the spotlight, but in doing so, some lost themselves entirely. In a town built on illusion, the real cost of beauty was never just skin deep. If these stories moved you, help us keep them alive. Subscribe, and let their truth outlast the glamour.